In any event, okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 48, verse 20. So Yaakov moves ahead with the bracha for Ephraim and Menashe, his grandsons. Vayivarachem bayom ahu lemor. And he blessed them on that day, saying, B'cha yivarech Yisrael lemor. In you, Yisrael will bless, saying, Yisimcha lokim ke'Ephraim v'Menashe. That God should make you like Ephraim and Menashe. Vayasem es Ephraim lifnei Menashe. And he placed Ephraim before Menashe. There's a lot of interesting things in this pasuk, but I just want to focus on one very specific thing. That opening phrase is striking. He blessed them on that day. And if it wouldn't have said on that day, when would you have thought he blessed them? Would you have thought he blessed them at this time, or would you have thought he blessed them at another day? Of course, he would have assumed he blessed them. We're telling a story. Of course, he blessed them on that day. What does that mean? He blessed them on that day. So Ramban on pasuk chaf, Vayivorchem bayom ahu, tam bayom ahu, bavur she Yosef yiftzar bo, lasu Menashe rishon. Yosef had pushed him. You need to put Menashe the Bechor first. Higid kilo ratza lohasir yad yamino merosh Ephraim al rosh Menashe. V'lo od el shechasar v'amar befeirosh b'mamarahu b'fnei Yosef v'vercho osam ke'Ephraim v'chimnashe. The Ramban is explaining that the reason it says on that day is Yaakov responded emphatically through his actions to Yosef's suggestion to switch Ephraim and Menashe. So the idea of blessing them on that day is basically he did it exactly as he was originally going to do it, and that's what the emphasis of on that day is. And by the way, he made a point of not only keeping them in this position, but as it says at the end of the pasuk, when he refers to them in the bracha, he refers to them as Ephraim and Menashe, putting the second son first. So that's just the pshat the Ramban says in this verse. Okay. Verse 21. Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef. Yisrael said to Yosef, Hine anochi mes, I am on the verge of death. Vaya Elokim imochem, God should be with you. Ve'yeshivaschem el eretz avosechem, and he should bring you to the land of your fathers. Verse 22. Va'ani nosati lecha Shchem achad al achecha. I am giving you an extra portion over your brothers. This, of course, is the idea that there are two tribes coming from you. Asher lakachti miad Amori, that I took from the Amorites, bicharbi uvekashti, with my sword and with my bow. This sounds really exciting. This sounds really, it sounds like Yaakov was some military powerhouse and that he got land through his sword and bow. What in the world is this talking about? When did Yaakov get land from the Amori with his sword and bow? Just even on a straightforward meaning, what's going on in this verse? So let's start with Rashi. We're not going to see all the Rashis. There's a number of Rashis on this pasuk. I believe it's the third Rashi on this pasuk. Bechar b'yavakashti. Kishahargu Shimon v'Levi as anshe Shechem, niskansu kol svivoseim lizdavig lohem. V'chogar Yaakov klei milchama kenegdam. So the first pshat that Rashi brings down is, yes, it was very exciting. It was very real. And what happened was as follows. If you remember the story, when Shimon and Levi killed the residents of Shechem, Yaakov was very upset with them. You know, the whole story with Dinah, if you remember that, Yaakov was very upset with them. And the primary reason that Yaakov's upset with them is, what in the world are the neighbors going to do now? We're creating a reputation for ourselves as being very dangerous people. Who knows how the neighbors are going to react? Neighboring nations. And that's sort of the end of the story. So it's very interesting, you know, and somebody even made a comment to me about it this year. I don't think it was in this group. I think it was just in person. I sometimes talk to people not on Zoom. So the bottom line is, like, it's so interesting. So was he right? Was he wrong? Was he just being worried? It's an interesting, it's sort of an unresolved question a little bit when you look at the psukim over there. Rashi's saying here, this is the resolution. He was right to be worried. Guess what? There was a war afterwards. There was a war from neighboring nations because you came into this land and you killed the men of one of the cities. What are you people doing? And Yaakov had to fight. And so according to this pshat, Presumably, it's not mentioned at that point in the story because it's not really relevant. But presumably, the idea is that we're revealing here that Yaakov did have to fight to get things. One pshat. Now, according to this pshat, presumably according to this pshat, Shchem Achad, which I translated as an extra portion, actually doesn't mean an extra portion. It means Shchem, the city of Shchem. I am the holder of the city of Shchem right now because I got it in war, in the aftermath of the story of Shimon and Levi, etc. So I'm going to give you the city of Shchem. That's one pshat. Davar acher, another pshat. Shchem Achad Hiabachora. As this was how we translated, that I've given you one portion, referring to the birthright. Sheyitlu banav shnei chalakim, that his sons will take two portions. Okay, now if you say like this pshat, so what's he talking about? I'm going to give you double portion because you have two sons that will be two tribes. What's that have to do with what Yaakov did with a sword and bow? What's this about? Asher lekachti miyad Amori, miyad Esav, she'asa ma'aseh Amori. I'm passing on to you my own rights that I got from Esav. In other words, that I had to fight. I had to fight with the angel of Esav, whatever it is. So that's the upshot. Davar acher shayatzad aviv b'imrei fiv. Another interesting pshat. Well, we won't get distracted with that. So if you say that it means that I'm imparting to you what I got from Esav, what's it to do with the sword and bow? I mean, even if you say it refers to the fighting with the angel, he didn't do it with a sword and bow. Says Rashi, B'charbi uvakashti, hi chachmasi usfilasi. My sword is my wisdom, and my bow is my prayers. I didn't get this through brute strength. My overcoming Esav had to do with putting my own head on my shoulders, davening to Hashem for success. So it could be sword and bow is a reference to the fight in the aftermath of the story of Shimon and Levi, and then it's a reference to the city of Shechem. It could be we're just talking about that Yaakov was saying through wisdom and prayer, he bested Esav, and that now he's passing on those blessings to Yosef. There's an extremely famous Targum Onkelos, quite possibly the most famous Targum Onkelos in the Chumash. If you happen to have Onkelos in whatever you're looking at, if you look at the last two words on this verse, you don't even have to, because it's on the words of B'char V'Kashti. He says, B'tzlusi uvivausi. And these are both languages of prayer. And that it means that Yaakov is saying that which I got through prayer. There's much discussion about this. Why does he use two languages of prayer? And actually, it's a really interesting thing. There's an idea of personal prayer. It's a very important thing, by the way, particularly in these times. It's a very important thing to be aware of and to be cognizant of. We really have two forms of prayer. One form of prayer that we have is the script, and these are very holy words with great meaning. And obviously, the more focus we have when we say the words, the more powerful they are. But it's sort of like a tried and tested formula, and like we're good. But then there's another form of prayer, which is just talking to God, and that can be in any language. And all prayer is more potent when it's with kavanah, but particularly if it's just my own, what's on my mind. The more powerful my focus, my intention, my passion when I speak, the more potent the prayer is. And actually, what many Mefarshim say is that's the language here of my sword and my bow. A sword, if I'm holding a sword and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm still a potent combatant. Because if you get too close to me, even a guy like me, the sword's pretty sharp. I could hurt you. Even if I don't know what I'm doing, I could hurt you. So theoretically speaking, the basic words of prayer are like a sword, not in a hurtful way, but the basic words of prayer are potent, whether they're in the hands of a veteran or not. A bow and arrow. If I don't have a clue what I'm doing, I mean, I mean, it's possible that I'll hurt myself or my peers, whatever, the people on my side, as much as it is that I'll hurt other people. And probably the most likely thing is I won't do anything to anybody because I won't even successfully fire it, or I'll fire it off in some crazy direction or whatever it is. So that's personal prayer. That personal prayer, if I'm not thinking about it, if I'm not focused on it, it has very little meaning. But what they say, and this is really neat to think about, a bow and arrow, if done with focus and intent, and a person that actually knows what they're doing, can be far more potent than a sword, because it can go much further. A sword is very, very powerful, but you're really somewhat limited in terms of how far you can get with it. The bow and arrow could go very far, and that's the power of the personal prayer. So this is just a very interesting list to think about, and to think about tefillah, etc. I'd like to go over to the Ramban now. The Ramban, I think it's the second Ramban on this pasuk. No, I think it's maybe the third one. B'tam b'charbi v'kashti. B'tam b'charbi v'kashti. Ki haaretz lo sikavish lem rak b'charev v'keshes. The Ramban understands it not like either Pshat and Rashi. The Ramban says this is actually a futuristic reference to the ultimate inheritance of the land of Israel. So it's not that Yaakov is, though literally the meaning is what he did, but what he's really saying is, Yosef, your descendants will have an extra portion of the land that my broader descendants, the whole nation, will successfully conquer. And they're going to have to fight for the land. Yirmos lamasha amar akasav lahoyse ira sherishlimu bnei Yisrael bilti achivi yoshvei givon esakola chuba milchama kimeis Hashem ha'isal lechazekas libam lekrasa milchama Yisrael l'man acharimam. He cites a very interesting pasuk in Yoshua, and that basically, except for one city, they had to take every city in Israel by force. Nobody folded for them. When God gave them strength and God gave them courage. Love. So what in the world is Yaakov talking about? His sword and bow? It's Yaakov's sword and bow. It's his descendants' sword and bows. It's Yaakov's merits that will bring them success in the war. So it's like, by extension, my sword and my bow. For people who were on the women's Navi class last night, it's strikingly similar to what we ended off with David, that it talks about the Beis HaMikdash was built for the sake of David, because again, it was in David's merits in the first place. We might continue with this Ramban tomorrow, we might not, I'll have to decide. But what we have here is we have three very interesting ideas, all very different one from the other. One pshat is it's a reference to Yaakov's fighting about the city of Shechem. One pshat is a reference to what Yaakov got from Yosef. To what Yaakov got from Esav, and that he's imparting the birthright that he got onto Yosef. And one pshat is it has to do with the conquering of the land of Israel.